"You're a bitter loser," Trump sneered the words across the room, thinking he could intimidate Jasmine Crockett. But she had already uncovered 17 classified documents revealing $4.3 billion in misused funds. Dozens of hidden contracts and a network of covert deals had gone unnoticed for over 8 years. Within minutes, the chamber erupted into chaos. Journalists gasped, lawmakers whispered in shock, and every camera zoomed in on Jasmine, ready to dismantle the so-called invincible president piece by piece. Jasmine Crockett rose from her seat, her posture sharp, eyes blazing with a fire that had consumed her for years of watching injustice go unpunished. She pointed directly at Trump, her voice slicing through the murmur of the room like a blade. "You are a man who disregards the law," she declared, her words echoing off the marble walls. "You think power places you above justice, but today you will answer for every deception, every betrayal, every life affected by your choices." Trump's lips curled into a twisted smirk, the kind that had intimidated many before. But today, Jasmine did not flinch. "Oh, look at her, preaching justice as if she understands it," he sneered, his voice dripping with mockery. "Do you honestly believe anyone cares about your little crusade?" The chamber reacted instantly. A collective gasp ran through the journalists' tables. Pens paused mid-note, cameras tilted, and murmurs swelled into an audible roar. Lawmakers on both sides of the aisle leaned forward, some in admiration, some in disbelief, as if the very air had thickened with tension. The room was alive with electricity, every heartbeat sinking to the rhythm of confrontation. Jasmine took a deliberate step forward, letting the weight of her presence fill the space between them. "I don't need your approval," she shot back, her tone icy yet resonant, each word calculated to pierce the veil of arrogance Trump so carefully constructed. "I stand here for every voice you have silenced, every promise you have broken, every law you have trampled." Trump leaned back slightly, his smirk faltering for a fleeting second. "Such bravado," he hissed, almost under his breath, yet loud enough for the room to catch the sharp edge. "A young woman daring to lecture a president. How quaint." But Jasmine did not yield. She opened her binder with a deliberate motion, the rustle of papers punctuating the charged silence. "Do not mistake youth for inexperience," and she said, her eyes never leaving his. "In these documents, you will find the truth you tried to bury, the evidence that exposes your manipulation, and the lives ruined by your decisions. And make no mistake, we are only at the beginning." A ripple of shock traveled through the chamber as reporters leaned closer, capturing every moment. The tension was tangible, almost unbearable, a storm hovering on the edge of eruption. Trump's hands clenched the arms of his chair. His voice, normally commanding, wavered slightly as he countered. "You think this will stop me? You think these papers, these evidence, mean anything in the grand scheme of power?" Jasmine's reply was a measured step closer, the calm in her demeanor a stark contrast to the fury around her. "Power without accountability is tyranny," she said, her words rolling over the chamber like thunder. "And tyranny has a shelf life. Your time is being measured, moment by moment, in every gasp, every whisper, every camera that catches your fear." The room had transformed. It was no longer a hearing, it was a battlefield. Every word, every glance, every subtle movement was ammunition in a war of wills. Trump, accustomed to controlling the room, found himself off balance, dodging blows of logic and morality he could not parry with insults or charm. Jasmine, in turn, maintained her rhythm, precise and unrelenting, each sentence designed to dismantle the facade of dominance he had cultivated for decades. A few seats away, colleagues exchanged glances, recognizing the magnitude of the confrontation unfolding before them. Journalists typed furiously, their words attempting to capture the gravity and ferocity in real time. Cameras panned and zoomed, immortalizing every expression, every flicker of doubt or defiance. And through it all, Jasmine Crockett remained the eye of the storm, unwavering, a living testament to justice, confronting corruption head-on. The room seemed to bend around her focus, every sound and movement orbiting the force of her conviction. Trump, for all his experience, all his theatrics, found himself reacting instead of dictating, caught in the gravity of a fight he could no longer control. As the initial sparks of confrontation blazed into full intensity, Jasmine's gaze swept the chamber one last time before addressing the media directly. "The truth does not wait," she said, her voice steady yet commanding, "and neither will justice." The moment hung in the air, pregnant with anticipation, as the room held its collective breath, knowing that the story unfolding was not just about one hearing, or one president, or one lawyer. It was about the power of accountability, the courage to confront it, and the relentless pursuit of what is right. And if you want to witness every moment of this storm, every confrontation, and every revelation, make sure to subscribe to Harrison Stories, where no silence goes unchallenged and every truth finds its stage. But the storm had only just begun. Jasmine Crockett didn't allow Trump a single second to regain control. With a sharp motion, she slammed a stack of documents onto the oak table, the papers rattling like gunfire through the chamber. The room froze for a heartbeat, stunned by the audacity and precision of her action. Every eye tracked the sudden explosion of evidence: contracts, memos, recordings, all pointing to decades of misused power, billions siphoned without oversight, and a network of influence that stretched further than anyone had dared imagine. Trump's chuckle was low, venomous, a sound meant to belittle. "Ah, the little actress thinks she's leading the show," he spat, his voice a mix of mockery and rage. "You're nothing more than a political stunt, a puppet trying to play at justice." The chamber erupted. Shouts bounced off marble walls as allies and critics alike leaned into the chaos. Some clapped, others jeered, every single person swept up in the escalating duel. The reporters' pens flew across notebooks, cameras whirred to life, and the live feeds captured every nuance: the flicker of fear in Trump's eyes, the steely calm in Jasmine's gaze. Jasmine's lips curled slightly, not in fear, not in hesitation, but in the satisfaction of precision. "This isn't a performance," she said, her voice carrying across the uproar. "This is reality, and reality has no scripts. The American people deserve to see the truth, and today they are seeing it in full." Trump slammed a hand against the table in frustration, rattling glasses and sending papers sliding. "Truth?" he barked. "You think you know it, girl? You don't understand how power works. You don't understand how the world bends for men like me." "Then let them understand," Jasmine replied, her voice rising just enough to cut through the roar of the chamber. "Let every lie be exposed, every deception unveiled. Power may bend men, but it cannot bend justice." Putin. The room's energy was electric, almost suffocating. Whispers became chants, gestures became arguments, and the space transformed into a battlefield of ideology. Supporters on both sides were yelling, some banging fists on desk, some gesturing wildly, all caught in the whirlwind Jasmine had unleashed. What began as a hearing had morphed into a clash of titans, a confrontation that no one in that chamber would ever forget. Trump, usually composed under scrutiny, was visibly rattled. Sweat beaded along his temples as he attempted to regain his dominance, leaning forward with a voice dripping with venom. "You think documents and numbers scare me? You think exposure can touch me? I've survived worse than you can even imagine." Jasmine, however, did not flinch. She stepped closer, each movement deliberate, commanding attention. "Survival isn't the same as accountability," she said, her gaze piercing. "You may have escaped consequences before, but not today. Today, every lie, every act of corruption will face the light." The air seemed to crackle. Reporters whispered urgently into microphones, capturing every syllable, every subtle reaction. Lawmakers shifted in their seats, some nodding, some frowning, unable to ignore the seismic shift happening right before their eyes. Even the security detail, trained to anticipate chaos, stood rigid, sensing the intensity of the showdown. Trump's smirk returned for a fleeting second, a predator regaining composure, and he shot back. "You think your righteous words matter? You think the people will follow your little crusade? They'll laugh at you. They'll call you naive." Jasmine's response was almost serene, a stark contrast to the storm around her. "Naive?" she said softly, yet with the weight of a hammer striking stone. "Perhaps, but it is better to stand for truth and be called naive than to bend your soul to lies and be celebrated for it. At that, the chamber seemed to inhale collectively. Every whisper, every gasp, every camera flash amplified the intensity. Supporters of Trump shouted over Jasmine's voice, while her allies cheered, creating a wall of sound that reflected the clash of morality against ambition. Then, with a calm precision that belied the chaos, Jasmine spread the documents across the table, leaning forward slightly so that every official, every reporter, every camera operator could see them. Each sheet was a dagger aimed at the facade of power. "See this," she said, her finger tracing figures and signatures. "This is what happens when no one holds you accountable. This is the cost of unchecked authority." Trump's face tightened. He leaned back, searching for a retort, a strategy, anything that could regain the upper hand. But the momentum was no longer his. The chamber had shifted. Jasmine had claimed it, if not with force, then with truth, with clarity, and with an unyielding resolve that left no room for theatrics. And in that moment, every viewer watching on every screen across the country felt it. The electricity of confrontation, the thrill of witnessing justice collide with unchecked power, and the certainty that this battle would be remembered for generations. As the initial chaos settled into a tense anticipation of what was coming next, one thing was clear. Jasmine Crockett had set the stage, and no matter how loud or venomous the opposition, the truth was ready to strike. Trump's hands slammed against the oak table with a thunderous crack, rattling papers and microphones, his eyes blazing with a mix of fury and disbelief. "You're a liar," he barked, pointing a finger directly at Jasmine, each word slicing through the chamber like a whip. "Everything you've presented is a fabrication, a manipulation. How dare you stand here and call me corrupt?" The room trembled under the force of his outburst. Reporters froze mid-frame, pens hovering over notebooks, cameras trembling in the hands of their operators. Lawmakers instinctively leaned forward, their murmurs escalating into loud, urgent whispers. The chamber was alive with tension, every heartbeat synchronized with the escalating confrontation. Jasmine Crockett did not flinch. Her jaw tightened, eyes narrowing into a steely glare that could pierce steel. "Liar," she countered, her voice cutting through the chaos, sharp as a dagger. "You've spent decades lying to the American people, bending laws to your will, manipulating systems to serve yourself while millions suffer. If calling out the truth makes me a liar, then history will vindicate me and condemn you." Trump's smirk faltered for the briefest of moments. He leaned back, trying to recalibrate, but Jasmine didn't give him the space to breathe. With a deliberate motion, she slammed her hand down on the documents again, scattering papers like shrapnel. "These aren't opinions," she said, her words deliberate and precise. "These are facts, signed, verified, undeniable. And every attempt you make to discredit them only proves the depth of your fear." The chamber erupted into pandemonium. Supporters of both sides were shouting, some banging fists on desks, others pointing fingers, voices overlapping in a cacophony of outrage and astonishment. Cameras pivoted frantically, capturing every twitch, every glare, every subtle movement that signaled the battle of wills underway. Even security personnel trained to anticipate disturbances paused, sensing the unprecedented magnitude of this confrontation. Trump's voice rose again, cracking with anger. "You're reckless," he yelled. "You have no idea what you're playing with. This is politics, not a courtroom drama. You're nothing but an ambitious child pretending to wield power." Jasmine leaned forward, her gaze unwavering, her tone icy yet resonant. "Ambitious?" she said, letting the word hang like a guillotine blade. "Perhaps. But ambition for justice is nothing compared to your ambition for greed. You confuse intimidation for strength, chaos for control, and silence for loyalty. But the world sees through it." The intensity in the room was almost tangible. Every whisper, every gasp, every flash of a camera amplified the showdown. The chamber had transformed into an arena, a place where power, truth, and conviction collided in an electric storm. Trump's usual command over the room faltered as he tried to regain dominance, yet each move he made was met with Jasmine's unwavering focus. each word she uttered striking him like precision-targeted blows. And then came the moment that froze everyone. Trump, his face red and trembling, suddenly stood from his chair, rising as if to leave, the motion sharp and threatening. The room collectively held its breath. Every journalist's lens focused, every lawmaker's eyes widened, every camera capturing the potential collapse of decorum. For a split second, it seemed the hearing could unravel entirely, the president abandoning his post in a show of desperation. But he didn't. Not yet. The knowledge that millions, perhaps tens of millions, were watching, that the world's eyes were upon him, forced his hand. Slowly, grudgingly, he sank back into his seat, his glare boring into Jasmine, a mixture of rage, fear, and unwilling respect flickering in his eyes. Jasmine exhaled subtly, letting the tension hang in the room, the calm at the eye of the storm. "This isn't about theatrics, Mr. President," she said quietly, though her words carried across every inch of the chamber. "This is about accountability. Every misdeed, every misuse of power, every life affected by your choices. Today it will face scrutiny, and the world will witness it." The chamber seemed to lean forward collectively, caught between shock and admiration. Even Trump's allies exchanged uneasy glances, sensing that the narrative had shifted. Jasmine's presence was magnetic, her resolve palpable, commanding attention and respect simultaneously. Every document, every fact she presented now carried weight. Every word she uttered a blow against arrogance and deception. Trump's hands clenched tightly on the armrests, veins visible, his voice now a low growl. "You think you've won?" he hissed. "You think this is over?" Jasmine's reply was steady, unwavering, and lethal in its precision. "I don't think, I know," she said. "And this is only the beginning. History will remember this moment, the confrontation between truth and power, and it will judge the guilty accordingly." The room fell into a tense hush. The storm had calmed just enough to allow every observer to register the full weight of what had just transpired. Cameras panned, journalists whispered, lawmakers digested, and the public, millions watching live, felt the electric charge of a battle that would define legacies and shape history. In that tense silence, Jasmine Crockett's gaze never wavered. Trump, for all his experience, all his theatrics, had been forced to reckon with a force he could not intimidate. A woman armed with facts, courage, and unrelenting determination. The stage was set for the next act, and the world was waiting, breathless, to see who would emerge victorious. Jasmine Crockett reached into her folder and pulled out a small recorder, the weight of it almost symbolic, the kind of device that could change the course of history in a single moment. With a calm, deliberate motion, she pressed play. The chamber was instantly filled with the unmistakable voice of Donald Trump, caught in his own words, admitting actions that contradicted every public statement he had made for years. The effect was instantaneous. A collective gasp swept through the room as lawmakers leaned in, jaws dropping, eyes wide with disbelief. Journalists scrambled to record, fingers flying across keyboards, microphones pivoting to capture every word. The sound of Trump's own voice, revealing his duplicity, reverberated through marble walls as though the chamber itself had been shaken by the force of revelation. Trump's face turned pale, almost ghostly, yet he maintained a stubborn posture, lips pressed tight in defiance. "This is fake," he shouted, his voice cracking slightly despite his usual bravado. "This is edited, a setup. You have no proof that this is real." But Jasmine didn't flinch. Her eyes were locked on him, unyielding, her finger tracing the small recorder as if to emphasize that the truth could not be denied. "Proof?" she asked, voice steady and cold. "The proof is your own words. You can deny reality all you want, but your actions have been recorded, documented, and verified. And the American people are listening." The chamber erupted. Supporters of both sides erupted into cheers, jeers, and shouts, the cacophony echoing against the high ceilings. Some slammed fists on desks, others raised voices in defiance or outrage. But the energy was undeniable. This was no longer a verbal duel. It had become a spectacle of exposure, an arena where truth collided directly with ego and power. Trump slammed his hand against the table again, rattling papers, a futile attempt to assert dominance. "You think this little trick changes anything?" he growled. "I've faced tougher critics, I've survived worse scrutiny, and little you, think you can bring me down?" Jasmine stepped closer, her voice rising just enough to cut through the chaos without screaming. "I don't need to bring you down," she said. "Your words brought you down. Your duplicity, your arrogance, your disregard for law and ethics, it is all here, in your own voice. You are witnessing the collapse of the shield you have hidden behind for decades." The room seemed to vibrate with the intensity of the confrontation. Every camera captured the subtle flickers of fear, every quiver of the jaw, every narrowing of eyes as Trump fought to maintain composure while the reality of exposure settled like a weight around him. Journalists whispered urgently into microphones, broadcasting live reactions to millions of viewers across the nation. Trump's nostrils flared, his breathing sharp. "I will not be humiliated in front of the world," he shouted. But the defiance lacked conviction. His voice trembled as he searched for a way to pivot, to redirect the narrative, to salvage the remnants of control he had clung to for so long. Jasmine's lips curved into a small, controlled smile, the kind that spoke of victory yet was tempered with professionalism. "Humiliation?" she asked softly, letting each word land like a hammer. "You've humiliated yourself. Every lie, every cover-up, every act of deception, it has been exposed. You are not above scrutiny, and the world is watching." The chamber fell into a tense, charged silence. Even Trump's most loyal allies exchanged uneasy glances, realizing that the tide had shifted, that the confrontation had reached a critical turning point. Jasmine's calm authority dominated the room, a stark contrast to the faltering force of a man caught in his own contradictions. Then came the subtle, almost imperceptible moments. The slight droop of Trump's shoulders, the fleeting glance around the room as he weighed the impossible situation. Jasmine's presence was magnetic, commanding, almost gravitational. She did not need to raise her voice. The power of the evidence, the undeniable truth in the recording, did all the talking. With a deliberate pause, she spread the documents and the recorder across the table so everyone could see, reinforcing that the confrontation was not just verbal, but tangible, irrefutable, and impossible to ignore. "This," she said, voice firm, "is accountability, and it starts here, in front of every eye, with every fact laid bare. History will not forget it, and neither will the American people." Trump's jaw clenched, lips pressed tight, as though the words themselves were physical blows. For a moment he looked like he might rise, storm the chamber, or retreat entirely. But the knowledge that the world was watching, live, in every living room and device across the country, forced him to remain seated, caught in the gravity of the moment. And in that charged silence, one thing was undeniable. Jasmine Crockett had not only seized control of the room, she had shattered the illusion of invincibility, leaving the president exposed in front of the entire world. The clash was no longer merely political. It was a seismic confrontation of truth against ego, of courage against corruption, and of accountability against impunity. If you want to see every revelation, every confrontation, and every shocking turn as this battle unfolds, make sure to subscribe to Harrison Stories, where every truth finds its stage, and no voice demanding justice goes unheard. Trump's face twisted with fury, his composure cracking under the relentless spotlight. He jabbed a finger at Jasmine, voice sharp and jagged. "And you, Crockett, you parade yourself as the champion of justice, but who are you to lecture anyone? Every word you've spoken today is just performance, a show for the cameras." The chamber shivered under the force of his words. Cameras pivoted, reporters froze mid-motion, pens hovering, every observer instinctively leaning forward. Allies and opponents alike sensed the storm about to erupt into something far more volatile than words. Jasmine's lips curved into a slow, deliberate smile, icy and precise. Her eyes locked onto his, unflinching. "Performance?" she said, voice cutting clean through the chaos. "Do you confuse courage with theatrics, or are you simply terrified that the truth has finally cornered you?" Trump's jaw clenched, veins pulsing along his temples. "You dare speak to me that way?" he bellowed. "You don't understand power, survival, leverage. Words won't stop me." Jasmine stepped forward, her movements deliberate, commanding the room without raising her voice. "Power without accountability is fragile," she said. "Survival built on lies is meaningless. You've relied on fear and deception for decades, but intimidation collapses under truth. And scrutiny, Mr. President, is exactly what you're facing." The chamber erupted. Voices collided. Some pounding desks, some gesturing wildly, some shouting in disbelief. Cameras swiveled to capture every flicker of emotion. Reporters scribbled furiously, lawmakers exchanged rapid-fire glances, and the room transformed into a live battlefield of moral force versus raw power. Trump slammed his fist on the oak table, rattling microphones and documents. "Do you think morality can corner me?" he shouted. "I've faced critics tougher, smarter, more ruthless than you." Jasmine's gaze remained unbroken. Calm, precise, and lethal, she delivered her words like surgical strikes. "Critics do not hide documents, manipulate laws, or twist reality to avoid consequences. That is what makes you dangerous. And today, danger meets accountability." Every camera in the room caught the subtle tremor in Trump's hands, the micro-expressions flickering across his face, the quiver of doubt, the hesitation before his next word. Journalists whispered urgently, pens flying, trying to keep pace with the storm. Trump leaned forward, pointing directly at Jasmine, his voice a growl. "You think this is over? You think anyone will follow your narrative? You're just a headline, a fleeting name." Jasmine stepped closer, unwavering, voice resonating with authority. "I am more than a headline," she said. "I am every truth you tried to bury, every injustice you ignored, every life affected by your choices. This is your reckoning, and it cannot be avoided." The chamber pulsed with energy. Chairs creaked, papers rustled, cameras pivoted to catch every twitch, every subtle expression, every beat of sweat. This was no longer political sparring. It was a visceral confrontation, a war of wills between arrogance and justice, fear and courage. Trump's eyes darted, searching desperately for support, grasping for control. But Jasmine's presence dominated the room. Her words struck like hammers, each glance a calculated strike to unravel his composure. The slight slump of his shoulders, the flicker of hesitation, the tightening of his fists, all betrayed the weakening hold he had tried to maintain. The voices rose, desks rattled under pounding hands, sweat glistened on foreheads, eyes narrowed, muscles tensed. Every camera lens captured the crescendo of confrontation. Power versus principle, ego versus accountability. The chamber had become an arena of history unfolding. Trump escalated his attacks, accusations flung like missiles. But Jasmine parried each one with precision, her responses cutting through bluster and exposing the fragility beneath his rage. The confrontation had evolved into something almost primal, a test of will, intellect, and courage. By the time the storm of words and tension began to subside, the chamber had been irrevocably transformed. Trump's confidence was visibly shaken, his face flushed. Jasmine, composed and resolute, had turned the room into a stage for truth, where courage and integrity dominated over bluster and intimidation. And just when the tension seemed unbearable, Jasmine's gaze swept the chamber, commanding attention. "We have a witness," she announced, her voice calm, yet carrying an authority that silenced the murmurs immediately. "Someone who has information critical to understanding the full scope of events." A hush fell over the room. The press cameras swiveled, capturing every reaction, every flicker of curiosity and fear. Lawmakers leaned forward, their pens paused mid-note. Trump's eyes narrowed, a flash of panic crossing his face. "What?" he barked. "A witness? You mean a puppet? A plant? This is a setup, Crockett." The chamber's energy shifted, thickening into a palpable tension. All eyes followed as the doors at the far end creaked open, and a figure stepped in, an ordinary face, yet one carrying the weight of revelation. Gasps rippled through the audience. It was as though lightning had struck the room. Every heart skipped a beat. Trump slammed his fist onto the table, the sound reverberating through the chamber. "Don't lie to them! That's a puppet! You're all being played!" he shouted, pointing at the witness with shaking hands. Jasmine did not flinch. "This is not about theatrics," she said. "This is about truth, and the truth is coming forward, whether it terrifies you or not." The witness stepped forward, nerves visible but determination unyielding. I, I've seen the documents, the communications, everything," they said, voice steady but carrying a tremor that betrayed the gravity of the moment. "The public deserves to know the truth. No one is above accountability." Whispers exploded across the chamber. Reporters scribbled furiously, cameras pivoted to catch the subtle expressions, and every lawmaker exchanged incredulous glances. The stakes had never felt higher. Trump's face contorted with rage. "You dare bring them here?" he roared. "This is a circus. You're all being deceived. You think the world will believe this?" Jasmine's eyes were unwavering. "The world has been deceived for too long. Not today. Today, we set the record straight." The witness presented a folder, sliding it across the table with a tremor in their hand that mirrored the tension in the chamber. "All of this," they said, voice steady now, "is verifiable. Every claim, every document, every email. The truth is here." Trump's voice cracked, desperation edging every syllable. "Fabrication, lies, you're all conspiring. This is nonsense." Jasmine leaned forward slightly, the calm eye in the storm. "Denial doesn't make lies disappear. The facts do not bend to fear or intimidation. You can yell, you can threaten, you can try to distract, but the truth will not be silenced." The room vibrated with the clash of raw emotion and icy determination. Cameras captured the smallest flinch, the faintest blink of doubt, the subtle tightening of a jaw. Viewers across the nation held their breath. Who was telling the truth? Who was lying? Every eye strained for an answer, every ear tuned to catch the slightest inflection. Trump's hands shook as he pointed at the witness. "You," he shouted, "you're nothing but a pawn, a puppet in their game. Do you understand what you're doing?" The witness did not waver. "I understand exactly what I am doing," they said. "I am speaking the truth for every person who deserves justice. I am not afraid of threats. I am not afraid of intimidation. I am not afraid of lies." The chamber erupted in whispers, some skeptical, some awed, some visibly shaken. Cameras captured every angle, the sheen of sweat on brows, the rapid breathing, the intensity in Jasmine's eyes as she watched the encounter unfold. Trump's face drained of color, his usual bravado slipping. This can't be happening," he muttered almost to himself, voice trembling with a mixture of disbelief and fury. "No one betrays me like this. No one." Jasmine's voice cut through the chaos, steady and commanding. "This is happening because truth cannot be contained. Lies cannot stand forever, and courage will always rise to meet injustice." The witness nodded, sliding more documents forward. The cameras zoomed in, capturing signatures, timestamps, and evidence that could not be ignored. Every movement seemed magnified, every gesture weighted with significance. Trump's fury escalated, voice rising, shaking hands flailing, attempting to dominate the space that had already been taken from him by fact and moral authority. "You think this proves anything? You think this will save you? Lies will crumble, puppets will falter, and the world will see." But the room no longer belonged to him. Jasmine's calm, unyielding presence anchored the chamber. The witness's courage and honesty created an unshakable momentum. Each document, each testimony, each word was a hammer striking against the fortress of deception he had built. And as the chamber absorbed the weight of the revelation, the world outside watched in collective suspense. The battle was far from over, but one thing was undeniable. A new force had entered the arena, one that could not be ignored, one that could not be silenced, and one that demanded reckoning. The stage was set for consequences that no amount of bluster or intimidation could erase, and every eye in the room knew the tides had shifted. Trump's face darkened with fury, his knuckles white as he slammed his hand onto the table. "I am the President of the United States," he barked, voice echoing off the chamber walls. "I demand this hearing be halted immediately. This is unlawful, and I will not be subjected to this theater. The gavel trembled in the clerk's hand. Murmurs rippled through the room as lawmakers and journalists alike turned to witness this unprecedented display of authority clashing with accountability. Cameras swiveled, capturing every twitch of muscle, every flare of nostrils, every tightening of a jaw. Jasmine rose from her seat, her posture unyielding, eyes blazing with defiance. Her voice cut through the chamber like a whip. "You can try to silence me, Mr. President, but you cannot silence the truth. You may control offices, procedures, and fear, but you do not control justice." A collective gasp echoed through the room. Some leaned forward in anticipation, others recoiled at the audacity of the confrontation. Every flash of a camera caught the tension, freezing the moment in time for millions who would witness it worldwide. Trump slammed both hands on the table now, leaning forward, his face red, veins pulsating. "You dare defy me in front of the entire country? I am the law. I am the power." "You power without accountability is corruption," Jasmine interrupted, her voice cold and precise, each word like a blade slicing through the room's chaos. "And corruption will always be exposed, no matter who wears the title of president." The chamber seemed to vibrate with the intensity of the clash. Chairs creaked, papers shivered under the force of hands slamming desks, and microphones picked up the rising storm of voices. Lawmakers shouted over one another, some supporting Jasmine's defiance, others scrambling to maintain order. The room had transformed into a political arena, every eye fixed on the escalating duel of wills. Trump's hands shook as he gestured wildly. "This is outrageous. I demand control. I will not—" "You will not silence what is already known," Jasmine cut in sharply. "You will not hide what the world has a right to see. You may try to command, to intimidate, to disrupt, but truth cannot be contained." The crowd in the chamber erupted. Shouts, cheers, and cries mixed with the rattle of pens and the whirring of cameras. The tension was suffocating, like the atmosphere of a gladiatorial arena moments before the first strike. Every word, every movement, every flash of emotion was amplified, almost unbearable in its intensity. Trump's face contorted, his usual confidence eroded under the relentless pressure. "This is a coup! This is a disgrace!" he roared. "I will not allow my name to be tarnished. Jasmine leaned closer, her eyes never leaving his. Her voice dropped slightly, but carried a weight that pressed upon every listener. "You are no longer defining your narrative. The narrative is already in motion. Every document, every witness, every fact is here. You cannot stop it. You can only face it." The chamber seemed to hold its breath. Every movement, every twitch, every beat of sweat was magnified. Reporters scribbled notes furiously, cameras spun to catch the full spectrum of reactions, and lawmakers exchanged rapid, silent messages with one another. The confrontation had become more than words. It was a visceral, almost primal struggle between unchecked authority and unwavering justice. Trump slammed a fist against the table one final time, leaning forward as if trying to physically reclaim control. "You think your theatrics intimidate me? You—" Jasmine's response was instantaneous, unwavering, and sharp. "I do not intimidate, I expose. You are afraid, Mr. President, afraid that the truth finally is no longer under your command." The room erupted into chaos. Supporters of both sides shouted, voices overlapping, some pounding the desks, others gesturing wildly. Every camera zoomed, capturing eyes wide with shock, jaws tightening, hands trembling. The chamber had become a war zone of words, a battlefield of willpower, and every observer knew they were witnessing history in real time. Trump's fury reached its peak, face red, chest heaving, voice breaking under the strain of trying to command control over a situation that had clearly escaped him. "I am the law. I am—" "Law without accountability is tyranny," Jasmine interrupted, her voice rising over the chaos, unwavering and commanding. "You may hold a title, but titles do not make one immune. Not from truth, not from justice, not today." The tension snapped like a live wire. Cameras caught every droplet of sweat, every narrowed eye, every subtle shift of power. Viewers could almost feel the room's electricity, the weight of the confrontation pressing against every frame. For the first time in decades, Trump faltered. The energy of the room, the courage of Jasmine, and the undeniable weight of facts had shifted the chamber irrevocably. The struggle was far from over, but the tide had turned. Authority clashed with integrity, intimidation collided with moral clarity, and the world held its breath, knowing that what followed could redefine everything. Then, as if drawn by an invisible magnet, both Jasmine and Trump rose from their seats, standing face to face. The room seemed to shrink around them, every observer caught in the gravitational pull of the confrontation. Eyes narrowed, muscles tensed, and the air thickened with anticipation. Trump's face flushed red, his nostrils flaring, voice breaking as he roared, "You think you can humiliate me? You think you can lecture the leader of the free world in front of everyone? You are nothing but a—" Jasmine cut him off, her tone icy, precise, and piercing. "I am the voice of accountability. I am every truth you tried to bury. I am the reminder that power is meaningless without responsibility. And you, Mr. President, are exposed." The words struck the chamber like gunfire. Reporters froze, microphones caught every inflection, cameras zoomed in on the quiver of fury in Trump's jaw and the unwavering calm in Jasmine's gaze. Every observer instinctively leaned forward, feeling the tension crawl down their spines. Trump's hands clenched, trembling as he spat back, "Exposed? You dare lecture me? I've controlled nations, manipulated systems, crushed enemies, and you think your words intimidate me?" Jasmine stepped closer, her presence commanding. "Not intimidate, reveal. You confuse arrogance with strength, bluster with courage. Today the world is watching, and the world will see you for what you are, not what you pretend to be." A hush fell across the chamber. Even the murmurs of aides and journalists seemed to vanish, leaving only the raw intensity between the two figures. Sweat glistened on foreheads, knuckles whitened on desks, and the slightest breath felt amplified, as if the entire world had condensed into this single moment. Trump's face contorted, his voice rising to a scream. You are dangerous. Do you know what you are doing? Do you understand the consequences of defying me?" Jasmine's response was immediate, precise, and merciless. "I understand exactly what I am doing. I am standing for justice, for truth, for every person you've tried to silence, every life you've impacted with deceit. This is not defiance. This is necessity." The tension in the chamber became almost unbearable. Chairs creaked, papers rustled, cameras pivoted, capturing every subtle reaction. Viewers at home, witnesses to history, could almost feel the electricity in the air, the collision of raw power and unwavering principle. Trump's hands flailed, pounding the table, scattering documents. Yet Jasmine remained composed. Her eyes locked on his, icy and unyielding. "You can scream. You can threaten. You can attempt to dominate this space, but the truth will not bend and justice will not be silenced." A subtle tremor passed through Trump. The bravado that had carried him for decades began to crack. The witnesses in the room held their breath, feeling the power of words collide with the force of evidence and moral authority. Every twitch of muscle, every flicker of eye, every shallow breath was magnified, as if the chamber itself were holding its collective heart. Trump's voice broke again, cracking under pressure. "I am the leader. You are a man," Jasmine interrupted, "who has been exposed by the courage you cannot suppress. Titles do not make one immune from accountability. Power cannot erase the consequences of lies and deception." The room erupted into murmurs, some whispering, some gasping, some holding pens frozen over notebooks. Cameras captured the glint of sweat on brows, the tightening of fists, the narrowing of eyes, the barely contained tension in every figure present. The confrontation had become more than words. It had become almost a physical force pressing on every soul in the room. Trump lunged forward slightly, voice rising to a desperate pitch. "You will regret this. Do you hear me? Regret. No one defies me without consequences." Jasmine's voice rose just enough to dominate the chamber, calm but cutting. "I have already weighed the consequences. I have already chosen truth over fear, justice over submission. Your threats do not shake me. Your bluster does not stop me. Today the world sees you, and they will remember. The moment stretched, taut as a wire, as if the slightest word or gesture could tip the balance. Observers could feel it in their chests. The raw energy, the intensity, the sense that history was being written in real time. Trump's face went pale, rage battling with the recognition that the chamber and the world had shifted under the weight of Jasmine's authority. Her poise, her words, her unwavering stare left him visibly unmoored. A man who had long wielded control, now confronted with the immovable force of truth. And for an instant, it felt as though the entire room had stopped. The only sounds were the faint rustle of papers, the shallow breaths of witnesses, and the distant hum of cameras capturing every detail. It was a moment suspended between chaos and revelation, between fear and courage, between domination and justice. And every person present knew it. The next word spoken could either crush one's spirit or cement a legacy of defiance and integrity. The chamber was alive, every movement charged, every glance amplified. The air vibrated with tension, and the audience, both inside and beyond the room, waited on the edge of collective breath. One more sentence could ignite disaster. One more retort could define history. And in that suspended moment, Jasmine's unwavering gaze never faltered. Trump's fury, for all its volume and intensity, could not break her calm. The stage was set for the final collision, the duel of words, wills, and truths that would determine everything. Jasmine took a deep breath, her eyes scanning the chamber, and then, with a deliberate calm, she reached into her briefcase and pulled out the ace up her sleeve. A folder, thick and marked with a red stamp that screamed classification. Top secret. The room froze. Cameras pivoted, reporters leaned forward, the murmurs halting mid-word. Every eye followed the simple movement, an ordinary hand lifting an extraordinary burden. Trump's eyes widened, a flicker of disbelief crossing his face before fury surged back like a tidal wave. "That's impossible," he shouted, voice cracking. "These documents are fabricated, forged, lies." Jasmine's gaze did not waver. She opened the folder slowly, letting the camera capture the first page. A dense sheet of evidence, signed, stamped, impossible to deny. "This is not fiction," she said evenly, voice cutting through the rising roar of the chamber. "This is the record of actions that cannot be undone, and they bear your unmistakable mark." The murmurs escalated into shouts. Reporters scrambled, live feeds cut abruptly to breaking news banners. Social media exploded in real time. The nation was watching, riveted, divided, electrified. Every household, every screen, every mind absorbed the tension. Trump slammed his palm onto the table, rattling microphones and scattering papers. "This is nonsense, fake news, you are trying to destroy me," he bellowed, veins standing out along his temples. Jasmine stepped closer, unwavering, her voice slicing through his bluster like a scalpel. "This is reality. Facts do not bend to threats. Lies cannot withstand scrutiny forever. And today, the truth stands before you, undeniable and unshakable." The chamber seemed to vibrate with every syllable. Journalists' cameras zoomed in on his face, capturing the twitch of a jaw, the widening of eyes, the faint sheen of sweat forming as fury battled disbelief. Lawmakers whispered in awe and shock, their pens moving furiously to document history unfolding before them. Trump's hands shook as he gestured wildly, voice rising to a desperate shriek. "This is treason! You can't prove anything. This is a setup, a hoax, a lie." Jasmine's gaze hardened, her voice now ice and fire intertwined. "I do not need to prove a lie. The proof is here. Every signature, every timestamp, every corroborated fact, all lead to one undeniable truth. You cannot claim ignorance, and you cannot escape accountability." The room erupted into chaos. Supporters of both sides shouted, some pounding desks, some gesturing wildly, others frozen in shock. Cameras swiveled to capture every angle. The flicker of doubt in Trump's eyes, the unwavering steadiness in Jasmine's posture, the reaction of every observer present. Trump's face drained of color, his usual bravado faltering. How could you? This is impossible. No one has these. I am the president." Jasmine leaned forward slightly, letting the intensity of her stare hold him in place. Being president does not make you immune. Titles do not erase choices. Power does not erase truth. And the world is watching. Every flash of a camera, every scribbled note, every heartbeat in the room was magnified. The tension pressed down, thick and suffocating, like a storm hovering over the chamber. The nation outside held its breath, unable to look away, divided yet united in the electric intensity of the moment. Trump attempted to recover, raising his voice, pounding the table, trying to reclaim the room. "You think this destroys me? I am untouchable. I am above." Jasmine's voice cut through, calm yet lethal. "No one is above accountability, not for deceit, not for manipulation, not for the lives impacted by your actions. This is your reckoning." The chamber fell silent for a heartbeat, and then the whispers erupted into chaos again. Cameras captured every micro-expression, the subtle trembling of hands, the tightening of jaws, the faint twitch of a smirk attempting to mask panic. This was history unfolding live, raw and unfiltered. Trump's voice finally broke, quivering, the facade of control unraveling. This cannot be real. This is fabrication, forgery, a setup." Jasmine's voice, steady, unflinching, reverberated through the chamber. "It is real, and it cannot be undone. You may scream, you may threaten, but the evidence stands and the truth cannot be erased." The air was electric, thick with tension and anticipation. Reporters continued their frantic coverage, cameras pivoting to capture every expression, every reaction, every tiny movement that could reveal cracks in composure. The nation watched, riveted, feeling as if they too were inside the chamber, witnessing the collapse of bluster under the weight of undeniable fact. For a moment, Trump stood frozen, the weight of exposure pressing down, his voice reduced to a harsh whisper. Jasmine remained a figure of unyielding authority, every syllable a strike, every gesture a declaration that the era of unchecked power had met its moment of reckoning. The stage was set, the documents laid bare, and the world waited, torn between disbelief and awe, captivated by the duel of wills, the collision of truth and denial, and the revelation that no amount of intimidation could ever silence justice. Trump's face was flushed, veins pulsing in his temple, yet he stood tall, chin raised, voice booming with defiant energy. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, projecting confidence he barely felt, "you have been misled. The media distorts reality, opponents manipulate facts, and today I will show you the truth." Some lawmakers shifted in their seats, a few eyebrows raised, and whispers ran through the chamber. For a fleeting moment, it seemed as though Trump might sway opinion, might spin the narrative, might reclaim some of the power that now seemed to slip from his grasp. But Jasmine Crockett did not flinch. Her eyes narrowed, her hands gripping the edge of the table, and her voice, cold, precise, and unwavering, cut through the charged atmosphere. "Mr. President," she said, each syllable a scalpel, "truth does not bend to rhetoric. Facts do not bow to bluster, and no amount of performance can erase what has been laid bare." Trump's hands clenched, and he gestured wildly toward the documents on the table. These papers are twisted, fabricated, misinterpreted. You think a folder proves guilt? You think theatrics can overturn decades of leadership?" Jasmine leaned forward, the chamber tightening around her words. "This is not theatrics. This is accountability. Every signature, every email, every timestamp you tried to hide, every choice you attempted to mask, they are all here, and everyone exposes the reality you cannot deny." The room seemed to vibrate with the intensity of the confrontation. Cameras swiveled, reporters scribbled furiously, and lawmakers exchanged rapid-fire glances. Even the usually composed officials found themselves caught in the gravitational pull of Jasmine's presence, feeling the weight of unassailable truth pressing down. Trump's voice rose, his confidence now tinged with desperation. "You think words can destroy me? You think courage alone can topple power? I am the president. I have allies, influence, authority. You have arrogance," Jasmine interrupted, voice razor sharp. "You have fear and you have isolation. Power without integrity is fragile. Influence without accountability is meaningless. And you, despite all your bluster, stand exposed. Some lawmakers shifted uncomfortably in their seats, and a few gasps punctuated the chamber. For a moment, the room seemed to tilt, caught between loyalty and clarity, between the spectacle of authority and the force of moral truth. Trump slammed his palm onto the table, rattling microphones, and papers fluttered to the floor. Do you hear me? I command, I control, I decide what is acceptable. You cannot silence me. Jasmine's eyes glinted, her calm unyielding. I am not silencing you. You have silenced yourself with your own actions. Every lie, every manipulation, every attempt to avoid scrutiny has brought you here. And here you will stand, exposed, accountable, unmasked before the world. Sono. The chamber seemed to quake under the weight of her words. Cameras captured every flicker of hesitation, every twitch of a finger, every tightening jaw. The audience, both inside and outside the room, was spellbound, suspended on the razor's edge between chaos and revelation. Trump's voice cracked, faltering under the intensity. This is a witch hunt. This is injustice. You cannot escape truth, Jasmine finished, each word striking like a hammer. You cannot rewrite history. You cannot hide behind titles or intimidation. The evidence, the witnesses, the facts, they are immutable, and today they define the judgment. The chamber erupted. Some lawmakers gasped audibly, others leaned forward, captivated. Reporters' pens flew across pages, cameras pivoted to every angle, capturing each micro-expression, the twitch of a lip, the narrowing of eyes, the subtle tremor in a hand. Trump's face went pale, confidence slipping like sand through clenched fingers. He opened his mouth, tried to shout, to claw back dominance, but each word faltered under Jasmine's relentless precision. Every argument he attempted was disassembled, every assertion shredded, every tactic exposed. And Jasmine, cold, controlled, merciless in her verbal assault, pressed forward. This is not personal. This is accountability. This is justice, and you will answer for every choice, every action, every life affected by the deception you wielded as power. The room seemed to vibrate with intensity. Every observer, whether ally or opponent, could feel the pressure, the weight of history pressing down. The duel had evolved into something primal, a verbal execution, a stripping away of pretense, a moment where nothing could hide behind bravado or authority. Trump's hands shook, voice reduced to a strained whisper. You cannot. Jasmine's eyes bore into his, her voice steady and final. I already can. The world is watching, justice is watching, and the reckoning has begun. The chamber fell silent for a heartbeat, and then erupted once more. Not in support of Trump, not in defiance, but in awe of the sheer force of truth dismantling the walls of power. The battle had ended, not with violence, but with clarity, integrity, and the undeniable power of moral courage. And as the cameras continued rolling, the nation held its breath, witnessing the collapse of bluster, the triumph of justice, and the final inescapable reckoning of a man who had ruled with intimidation, now confronted with the unstoppable force of truth. Jasmine took a deliberate step forward, the folder of evidence clutched tightly in her hands. The chamber seemed to pause, the collective energy of every observer zeroing in on the impending moment. Every whisper, every shifting chair, every camera click amplified the tension in the room. With a steady voice that carried over the murmur of chaos, she said, "This is it, the final record. The evidence that no title, no power, no intimidation can erase. The world has a right to see what has been hidden, and today, accountability is unavoidable." Trump's eyes flickered to the folder. For a fleeting second, the familiar mask of bravado faltered. He opened his mouth, tried to speak, but no words emerged that could counter the gravity of what was about to be revealed. His chest heaved, a storm of frustration and disbelief coiling tight within him. Jasmine placed the folder on the table and opened it slowly, deliberately, letting the cameras capture the red stamps, the official seals, the signatures, and corroborating details that made denial impossible. Every action, every document, Every trace of deception. It is all here, laid bare for the world to witness, she said, each word striking like the tip of a blade. The chamber erupted in the stunned murmurs. Lawmakers leaned forward, eyes wide. Reporters froze mid-sentence, hands hovering over microphones, cameras swiveling to catch every inch of the confrontation. Even the usually composed clerks and aides exchanged glances of disbelief. Trump's face went crimson, rage and panic warring across every line of his expression. This is impossible. Forged, fabricated, he barked, pounding the table with both fists, rattling papers and microphones alike. You think this destroys me? I am the president. I am above. You are above nothing, Jasmine cut him off, her voice sharp, unwavering, and perfectly measured. Power without accountability is empty. Authority without integrity is meaningless, and every attempt to hide behind it has failed. The chamber seemed to vibrate under the weight of her words. Every observer, from the most cynical reporter to the quietest aide, felt it. The magnitude of the moment. It was as if the air itself had thickened, pressing down with a force that made each heartbeat echo like a drum. Trump's hands shook. He opened his mouth again, but the words faltered, hollow and ineffectual. This is... Your lies, Jasmine interrupted, leaning slightly forward, eyes cold and unwavering. End here. Not because I am powerful, not because I am fearless, but because the truth is stronger than intimidation, stronger than bluster, stronger than any title you hold. A ripple ran through the chamber. Some lawmakers gasped audibly, others whispered urgently to one another. Reporters' pens and cameras moved frenetically, capturing every micro-expression, the twitch of a jaw, the narrowing of eyes, the trembling of fingers, the subtle flinch of a man who realized the game was over. Trump's face contorted in fury, disbelief and exhaustion, veins standing out along his neck. You dare humiliate me! You cannot, he shouted, voice breaking under the pressure. Jasmine's lips curved into a faint, resolute smile. I do not humiliate. I reveal. And today, the revelation is complete. She tapped the folder, a signal that the final proof, the ultimate evidence of deception, was now in plain sight for all to see. The reaction was instantaneous. The chamber erupted. Cheers, gasps, and shouts collided into a symphony of human emotion. Some lawmakers banged fists on tables in astonishment. Others leaned back, mouths agape, stunned by the clarity of the truth. Cameras whirred, flashing, pivoting, capturing the chaotic energy as reporters shouted into microphones, their voices barely audible over the roar of the crowd. Trump stood frozen, a monument to collapsed authority. His eyes darted from face to face, from folder to cameras, searching for some opening, some lifeline, some escape. But there was none. Every argument, every rebuttal, every claim of fabrication or conspiracy had been dismantled, shredded, rendered powerless under the weight of Jasmine's evidence. And Jasmine, poised and unyielding, stepped back slightly, letting the gravity of the moment resonate. This is accountability, she said, voice ringing across the chamber. This is justice, not delayed, not avoided, not silenced, but here, now, for everyone to witness. The room erupted again, a deafening wave of sound that mixed jubilation, disbelief, and the raw energy of a moment that would be remembered forever. Cameras spun to catch every reaction. Reporters with mouths open in awe, lawmakers leaning forward in stunned silence, aides clutching notepads, witnesses frozen in a moment that felt both terrifying and exhilarating. Trump's shoulders slumped slightly, the final threads of bluster unraveling before the force of irrefutable truth. He opened his mouth once more, but no words came that could change the reality of what had been laid bare. Jasmine had delivered the coup de grace, the final strike that left no room for doubt, no space for escape. The chamber's chaos subsided gradually into a tense, triumphant hush. The applause, the shouts, the gasps of astonishment blended into a singular recognition. Justice had prevailed, truth had triumphed, and the reign of intimidation had come to an abrupt, undeniable halt. For the first time that day, The entire room seemed to breathe in unison, the collective weight of history pressing down and releasing simultaneously. Jasmine Crockett had not just won a battle of words and evidence, she had crystallized a moment where accountability stood unshakable, and every observer from every corner of the nation understood the power of courage confronting corruption. The final strike had been delivered, the evidence immutable, and the force of truth now shone brightly for all to see. Justice had come, undeniable and unrelenting, right there in the chamber, and no bluster, no title, no intimidation could ever erase it. The gavel finally struck, echoing like a thunderclap through the room, signaling the official close of the hearing. The chamber, still thick with tension, seemed to exhale collectively, releasing months of anticipation, fear, and suspense in a single electrifying moment. Reporters jumped to their feet, voices overlapping in a frantic chorus as they relayed the breaking news. Cameras flashed, microphones captured every sound, and every live broadcast across the nation erupted with headlines that could scarcely contain the magnitude of the revelations. Social media exploded simultaneously, trending hashtags, viral clips, and debates spiraling across platforms as the story spread like wildfire. Jasmine Crockett stood calmly amid the chaos, her posture straight, her expression serene yet triumphant. Every step she took toward the exit carried the weight of a battlefield victory, each movement resonating with the power of truth affirmed. The room's energy seemed to bend around her, acknowledging the culmination of relentless courage and unwavering integrity. Trump lingered at the back of the chamber, shoulders tense, hands gripping the edges of his desk as though holding on to the last shreds of fading authority. His usual bluster and bravado were stripped bare, leaving behind a silhouette marked by defeat and a simmering, impotent rage. Shadows seemed to cling to him as he slowly receded, swallowed by the dimming light of his own undoing. The reporters surged toward Jasmine as she walked past, microphones thrust forward, cameras pivoting to catch every angle. But she moved with measured calm, answering no questions, offering no unnecessary statements. Her victory was silent yet deafening, an unspoken declaration that justice had triumphed not in spectacle, but in undeniable fact. Every step toward the exit resonated with symbolism. She was not merely leaving a chamber. She was leaving a battlefield, a crucible where truth had confronted intimidation, where courage had toppled pretense, and where the public eye had witnessed history unfold in raw, unflinching clarity. Outside the chamber, the hallway buzzed with whispers and hurried conversations. Lawmakers, aides, and journalists alike paused to absorb the reality of what had just occurred. Some faces were etched with disbelief, others with admiration, and still others with the dawning realization that nothing in their experience had prepared them for the force of what they had just witnessed. Trump's presence faded as he stepped back, retreating into the shadows of the chamber, leaving behind the remnants of authority that had once commanded attention and obedience. The air seemed to pulse with the echo of his absence, a reminder that power built on fear and deception is fragile, fleeting, and ultimately vulnerable to scrutiny. Jasmine, meanwhile, emerged from the chamber into the corridor's bright light, her every movement exuding quiet dominance. She did not need applause, recognition, or accolades. The knowledge of a truth upheld was triumph enough. But even as she walked, the energy of the room followed her, a ripple of awe and respect that no one could deny. The press swarmed outside, broadcasting live reactions, capturing the faces of those who had witnessed the confrontation and dissecting every detail. The nation watched, captivated, as Jasmine Crockett, the relentless warrior of justice, became the embodiment of integrity prevailing over intimidation. Yet even amid the victory, the echoes of the battle lingered. Analysts dissected the verbal sparring, the documents revealed, and the unwavering presence of truth. Citizens debated, discussed, and reflected on what had transpired. An extraordinary convergence of courage, intellect, and unyielding moral clarity that few could have imagined possible in modern political history. Trump's figure, receding into darkness, remained an indelible image, a symbol of the formidable force of opposition, the human propensity for resistance against exposure, and the ultimate vulnerability of power when confronted by unassailable evidence. His retreat was not merely physical, It was emblematic of a collapse of authority built on falsehoods, now illuminated in stark, unflinching relief. Meanwhile, Jasmine's passage through the corridor felt almost ceremonial. Each step measured, each glance composed, as if she carried not just personal victory, but the weight of every individual who had been denied justice, every truth that had been suppressed, and every voice that had long demanded to be heard. As she exited into the outside world, sunlight streaming through the windows, a quiet sense of resolution settled over the scene. The chamber behind her now held only echoes, echoes of confrontation, echoes of revelations, echoes of a battle that had reshaped the narrative of accountability and courage. The final image lingered. Jasmine Crockett, walking forward with the calm assurance of one who had faced the storm and emerged victorious. And behind her, the shadow of a fallen figure, a cautionary reminder that power is fleeting, but truth is eternal. The echoes of this extraordinary confrontation, the shouts, the evidence, the clashes, the exposed secrets, would ripple across history. It was a story of unyielding confrontation, of courage confronting deceit, and of the undeniable supremacy of justice over intimidation. And as the chamber emptied and the reporters continued their frantic coverage, one undeniable truth remained. This was a battle unlike any before in American history, a confrontation that fused intellect, courage, and moral fortitude into a spectacle of justice. Witnessed by a nation that would not soon forget the day the scales were balanced, the veil was lifted and accountability had its triumph. In the end, truth endured where power faltered, and courage illuminated paths that fear sought to obscure. Jasmine Crockett's unwavering integrity reminds us that justice is not granted by title or authority, but earned through steadfast commitment to what is right, even when the world resists. May this story inspire each of us to confront falsehood, uphold honesty, and act with moral courage, showing that even a single determined voice can challenge corruption, ignite change, and leave a legacy of righteousness for generations to come. If this confrontation gripped you, don't look away. Feel it, reflect on it, share it with someone who still believes in accountability. Like, comment, and send it to those who know that courage can topple deception. Subscribe to Harrison Stories, where no lie goes unchallenged and no injustice is ignored. Hit the bell, because the next revelation could shake everything you thought you knew. It's intense, and it might just change the way you see power, truth, and responsibility. This story is a fictional dramatization, inspired by real struggles for justice and integrity. Any resemblance to actual people or events is coincidental or symbolic, meant to provoke thought and reflection. Thanks for watching. Justice isn't given, it's earned. This is Harrison Stories.